When our parents left for the week, the house didn't just feel empty. It felt exposed, like a wound left open to the wind. Their departure had been rushed, as usual, a trail of quick hugs, half-packed suitcases, and promises to call. Then there was only the echo of their car fading down the street, and me standing at the doorway, realizing it was just me and Jamie again. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was thick, breathing between the walls. I'd been 24 long enough to think I understood solitude, but that week proved me wrong. Jamie had changed since the divorce. 19, but quiet like someone twice his age. He used to fill the house with noise, his music, his laughter, his constant, irritating optimism. Now he drifted around like a shadow, earbuds always in, hoodie always up, eyes somewhere far away. I worked from my room most days, editing videos for clients who existed only through email threads. I'd hear Jamie in the kitchen sometimes, the scrape of a chair, the sound of cereal poured too fast. We barely spoke except for small, forgettable things. There's milk in the fridge. Or don't forget to lock up. I told myself it was normal, that brothers grow apart, that quiet was better than conflict. But deep down, something inside me resisted the distance. That first night, I found him sitting on the back porch, knees pulled to his chest, watching the rain. The light from inside spilled across the wooden steps, stopping just short of his bare feet. "You get out here?" I asked. He didn't look at me, just thinking. "About what?" He shrugged, still staring at the rain. "Nothing really, just everything." It was such a Jamie thing to say, vague but heavy, like there was a secret underneath it. I wanted to push, to ask more, but his silence was fragile. I didn't want to break it. I sat beside him, the wood cold through my jeans. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain softened to a drizzle, tapping lightly against the gutter. I glanced at him. His hair was longer than I remembered, curling slightly at the edges, his eyes reflecting the dim porch light. He looked older, sharper somehow. But the sadness in his face was still the same one I'd seen years ago, the night our parents first announced they were separating. "You ever think about before?" I asked. He turned his head, confused. "Before what?" "Before everything changed." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, but I try not to. Doesn't really help, does it?" I wanted to tell him it did. That remembering could make things feel whole again. But I didn't. I just nodded, staring into the rain, letting the silence stretch until it became something almost comfortable. Later that night, lying in bed, I kept replaying that moment. The way he looked at me, like he was waiting for something I didn't say. I wondered when he started holding his words back, when he stopped seeing me as someone he could lean on. Maybe it was when I moved out for college, leaving him behind with parents already falling apart. Or maybe it was when I came back, trying to fix what I'd helped break. The next morning, the house smelled like coffee and toast. Jamie was already at the table, scrolling through his phone. "You're up early," I said, reaching for a mug. He smirked. "Couldn't sleep. This place makes weird noises at night. Old houses do that," I said, though I knew the noise he meant. It wasn't the creaking floors or the wind through the vents. It was a silence between us. We ate quietly. Occasionally he'd glance up, like he wanted to say something, then stop himself. I didn't push. I'd learned that his thoughts came in their own time. But as the day passed, the tension built. Small things, his half-finished sentences, the way he avoided my eyes, the tired way he laughed when I tried to joke, started to weigh on me. By evening, I found myself restless. I walked into his room, something I hadn't done in months. It looked different now, cleaner, darker, posters gone, curtains half closed. Only the faint light of his computer lit the room, painting his face in pale blue. "You busy?" I asked. He paused his video, turned in his chair. "Not really." I leaned against the doorframe, unsure of what to say next. "You okay, Jamie? You've been quiet." He let out a dry laugh. "You're one to talk." That hit harder than I expected. "Yeah," I said softly. "Guess I deserve that." He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "I don't know, Noah. You're here, but it feels like you're not. Like you're just waiting for something to end. His words landed like a mirror held too close. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't. I'd been living like a ghost since the divorce, doing what I had to, saying what was necessary, but never really feeling much of anything. Maybe I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, the world would fix itself. I crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. "I'm trying," I said. "I just don't always know how." He looked down at his hands. "You used to talk to me about everything. Remember when you'd sneak into my room after Mom and Dad fought? You'd make up stories to make me laugh." "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "You always made me tell the one about the brothers who got lost in the woods." That was my favorite. I stared at him for a moment, the memory filling the silence between us. Back then, he believed I could protect him from anything. Now, I wasn't sure I even believed that myself. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "Sometimes I wish we could just go back to that, when things were simple." I wanted to say me too, but the word stuck, because I knew simplicity was gone. What we had now was real, messy, fragile, unspoken. The rain started again outside, soft against the window pane. He closed his eyes, listening. "It's weird," he said quietly, "how the house feels different when it's just us." "How so?" "Like it remembers more than we do." I didn't know what he meant, but I felt it too. Every creak, every flicker of light felt like memory breathing through the walls. We sat in silence for a long while after that, two brothers in the same room, both trying to find something we'd lost years ago. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer, almost fragile. "Promise me you won't disappear again." I swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere." He nodded slowly, eyes still on the ceiling. "Good." When I left his room that night, I lingered at the door, watching him fall asleep to the sound of rain. The quiet didn't feel so heavy anymore, but it wasn't peace either. It was something else, something in between. I closed the door gently, whispering to myself, I didn't realize how much we both needed someone to stay. The next few days blurred together in quiet repetition. Coffee in the mornings, the sound of Jamie's music leaking faintly from his room, my laptop glowing late into the night. The silence had settled into something almost comfortable, fragile but breathable. Then, one Thursday afternoon, that silence broke with a single knock at the door. It was Dylan. He stood on the porch with his familiar crooked grin and a six-pack of cheap beer dangling from one hand. "You didn't answer my text," he said. "Figured I'd check if you were still alive." I hadn't seen him in months. We used to be inseparable in college. Late-night drives, endless conversations, the kind of friendship built on shared loneliness. But after graduation, life stretched us thin. Seeing him there, soaked in sunlight and nostalgia, felt like finding an old photograph come to life. "Still breathing," I said, smiling as I let him in. He stepped inside, his presence immediately filling the house. Dylan had that kind of energy, magnetic, effortless, the kind that made everyone else fade a little. "Man, this place hasn't changed," he said, glancing around. "Smells like coffee and rain. Just like you." Before I could answer, Jamie appeared from the hallway, barefoot and curious. Dylan turned, and for a moment, the air seemed to shift. "Jamie?" Dylan said, surprised. "You've grown up." Jamie smiled shyly. "Guess so. You're Dylan, right? The friend Noah never stops talking about." I laughed under my breath. "I barely mention you." "Sure," Dylan said, tossing me a knowing look before turning back to Jamie. "Well, it's good to finally meet. You were, 12 last time I saw you. Now you look like you could actually outrun me." Jamie grinned. "Maybe I could." The tension that had lingered all week dissolved a little in that laughter. For the first time in months, Jamie seemed lighter, more alive. He and Dylan slipped into conversation easily, like they'd known each other for years. I watched from the kitchen, pretending to be busy, but I couldn't stop noticing how their voices filled the space that used to echo with silence. As the afternoon turned golden, we sat around the living room. Dylan told stories, exaggerated college tales, half-truths wrapped in humor, and Jamie laughed in a way I hadn't heard in ages. It hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to be happy that he was opening up, that someone had managed to reach him where I couldn't. But beneath that warmth was something else, something sharp and unfamiliar. Later, when I stepped outside for air, Dylan followed, leaning against the porch railing beside me. "He's a good kid," he said. "Yeah," I replied quietly. "He's been through a lot." "Looks like it," Dylan said. "You too, huh?" I shrugged, eyes on the rain-streaked sky. "Maybe. I just try to keep things steady." He studied me for a moment, his tone softening. "You always do that. Carry everything until it breaks." "You don't have to." I laughed faintly. "Someone has to." Dylan's voice lowered, the way it always did when it got serious. "You can't keep saving everyone, Noah. Especially not him." The words lingered, heavier than he meant them to. I didn't answer. Maybe because a part of me knew he was right. Inside, Jamie had put on music, something mellow and wordless that drifted through the rooms. He called from the kitchen. "You guys want dinner? I can make pasta." Dylan smiled. "He cooks." "Barely," I said, "but he's proud of it." Dinner was simple, but it felt like a celebration of sorts. We ate, laughed, told stories that stretched late into the night. The sound of rain returned, tapping against the windows like a rhythm that matched our voices. But underneath the laughter, I couldn't shake a feeling I didn't want to name. When Dylan left that night, Jamie walked him to the door. I stayed behind, gathering dishes, tried to ignore the way their voices lowered, the quiet tone that didn't sound like goodbye so much as something beginning. After Dylan's car disappeared into the rain, Jamie lingered by the window, watching the streetlight flicker. "He's cool," he said softly. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "He's always been like that." Jamie looked over his shoulder. "You two were close, huh?" "Still are," I said. "Just different now." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. He seems like the kind of person you can talk to. I caught the meaning beneath his words, but pretended not to. "Maybe," I said. "You can too, you know. He's easy to get along with." "Yeah," he murmured, turning back the window. I noticed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing their laughter replaying in my mind. The way Dylan's voice softened when he spoke to him. The light in Jamie's eyes I hadn't seen in months. It wasn't jealousy exactly, not in the way it should have been. It was something quieter, an ache that didn't belong anywhere. The next few days, Dylan started showing up more often, always with some casual excuse, dropping off food, returning something he never borrowed, just checking in. Jamie didn't seem to mind. They played video games, watched old movies, even cooked together once. I'd come downstairs and find them laughing, their heads close, their voices low. I told myself it was fine. Jamie needed a friend, and Dylan was harmless. But deep inside, something restless began to twist. One evening, after Dylan left, I found Jamie sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "You okay?" I asked. He looked up, startled. "Yeah, just tired." "From what?" "You barely left the house." He smiled faintly. "Talking's exhausting." I sat across from him, watching the way the light from the TV flickered against his face. "He's a good guy," I said finally. "But be careful. Dylan doesn't always think before he acts." Jamie tilted his head, a hint of a challenge in his eyes. "You mean with you?" I hesitated. "With anyone." He nodded, though his expression said he didn't believe me. The silence that followed wasn't the same as before. It carried something unsaid, something that waited just beneath the surface. Later in my room, I heard them laughing again from downstairs. The sound was muffled, distant, but every note seemed to land somewhere deep in my chest. I closed my laptop, sat in the dark, listening. It went on longer than I expected. The laughter, then soft voices, then nothing. For a long while, I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it didn't matter, that it was just noise, just company. But somewhere in that quiet, a truth I didn't want to face began to take shape. I thought I was protecting them both. I didn't realize I was setting them both free. From me. A week passed before I realized how much had changed. Dylan was now part of our daily rhythm. His car in the driveway, his laughter spilling through the house, his shoes casually left by the door like he lived there. At first, it felt harmless, familiar even, but gradually, I began to sense a shift, subtle but impossible to ignore. Jamie was different, lighter somehow, yet distant in new ways. He spent more time on his phone, more time in his room, and when I asked who he was talking to, his answers were short, almost rehearsed. I didn't press. I told myself I trusted him, that he was just growing up, finding his space. But every time my phone lit up without Dylan's name, something inside me tightened. One evening, as the sun melted behind the rooftops, Dylan arrived again. He brought takeout and that same easy charm that had once been my escape from everything. "Hope you don't mind," he said, stepping inside. Jamie said he'd help me pick out a playlist for my new project. I forced a smile. "Since when are you two working on projects?" He grinned. "Since 5 minutes ago." "Don't worry. I'm stealing his taste in music, not your brother." His tone was playful, but something in the way he said it made me uneasy. I wanted to laugh it off, to believe that nothing about his visits was strange. Yet every look, every shared moment between them carried a quiet tension I couldn't name. After dinner, I walked past the living room and saw them sitting close on the couch, sharing earbuds, laughing at something only they could hear. Jamie's head tilted toward Dylan's shoulder, and Dylan didn't move away. I stood there for a second too long, before turning back to the kitchen, my chest tight. That night, when Dylan finally left, I found Jamie still on the couch, scrolling through his phone, smiling faintly. "You two get along," I said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he murmured without looking up. "He's easy to talk to." "Easier than me?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked up, startled. "It's not a competition, Noah." I opened my mouth, but no words came. It wasn't a competition, yet somehow it felt like I was losing something I never realized I'd been holding on to. The next morning, Dylan texted me. "You good?" I typed yeah, but didn't send it. Instead, I deleted the message and stared at the empty screen until it dimmed. By the weekend, I started noticing small things. Jamie stepping outside to take calls, his quick smile when Dylan's name appeared on his phone. Once, I overheard him say, "I can't." "He's here," his voice low, almost guilty. When he came back inside, he avoided my eyes. Something in me cracked then, not out of anger, but out of confusion. I didn't know what I was jealous of, or who I was angry at. Maybe both of them. Maybe myself. That Sunday night, Dylan showed up unannounced again. I tried to keep my composure as he walked in, but something in his eyes was different, hesitant, maybe regretful. He greeted me briefly, then glanced toward the hallway. "Is Jamie around?" "He's upstairs," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Dylan nodded, lingering as if waiting for permission. "Mind if I talk to him?" I wanted to say no, to tell him this had gone far enough. But instead, I just stepped aside. "Sure." Minutes later, I heard their voices from upstairs, muffled but urgent. I couldn't make out the words, only the tone. Then silence. A door clicked softly shut. Time dragged. I paced the living room, each creak of the floorboards loud enough to drown my thoughts. When Jamie finally came downstairs, his face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He didn't look at me. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing," he said too quickly. He just needed to talk." "About what?" He hesitated, the answer trembling in his throat before it broke free. He told me he liked me. The words landed like cold water. I stared at him, my mind blank, my pulse echoing in my ears. "He what?" Jamie's voice cracked. He said it wasn't supposed to happen, that it just did. I didn't know what to say. I tried to breathe, but my chest wouldn't move. "Dylan, the same Dylan who once swore loyalty through years of friendship, the same Dylan I trusted in my home, around my brother. Did you?" I began, but the question caught in my throat. I didn't want to know the answer. Jamie shook his head. "No." I told him he should leave. I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. The air felt heavy, thick with things unsaid. "You should have told me sooner." "I didn't want to make things worse," he whispered. "You already seem so far away." Those words hit harder than Dylan's betrayal, because they were true. I had been far away, hiding in my work, my silence, my fear of saying the wrong thing. I thought I was keeping us safe, when really I was just letting us drift apart. He sat beside me then, eyes glistening. I didn't mean for any of this. He just listened when you didn't. His honesty cut deep, not because it was cruel, but because it was fair. Dylan hadn't stolen anything from me. I'd given it away, through neglect, through distance, through my own silence. I pressed a hand over my face, the words slipping out like a confession. I thought I was helping him, keeping him company, giving him space, giving you both what you needed. Jamie's voice was barely a whisper. You offered him trust, and he used it. He left the room before I could answer, the sound of his door closing echoing through the house. I sat there long after, staring at the window where rain began to fall again, faint but steady. I replayed every laugh, every glance, every careless moment when I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. Every small thing mattered. Every time I stepped back, someone else stepped in. By the time Dylan's final text arrived, "I'm sorry. Don't hate me," I didn't have the strength to reply. There was no anger left, just exhaustion. I thought about Jamie, alone upstairs, and realized this was my fault as much as Dylan's. I had offered him comfort without presence, love without attention. I had been the one who looked away first. As the rain deepened outside, I whispered into the quiet house. I thought I offered him protection, but maybe I offered him away. And for the first time in years, I felt the full weight of what silence can destroy. The night that followed felt like a slow storm building in silence. The air was heavy with the words we hadn't said, with the glances that lingered too long and the questions we both pretended not to have. I could hear the quiet hum of the fridge, the distant ticking of the old wall clock, and the rhythmic breathing coming from the other side of the living room, where Drew sat staring into nothing. I wanted to speak, but fear tangled with guilt kept my voice buried somewhere deep inside my chest. He was my little brother, and yet nothing between us felt simple anymore. The innocence that once lived in our shared laughter and playful teasing had been replaced by an unspoken tension that neither of us understood completely. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was confusion, but it was real, and real was dangerous. When I finally broke the silence, my voice trembled. "You're not okay, are you?" Drew didn't turn right away. His fingers tapped restlessly on the edge of the couch, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Does it matter?" he said quietly, and there was something in his tone that made my stomach twist. "It does," I replied, moving closer. "You think I don't notice, but I do. You're shutting everyone out. You barely eat, you barely talk. I'm scared for you, Drew." He finally looked up, and the expression in his eyes felt like an echo of my own fears. "You shouldn't be," he whispered. "I'm fine. I just don't know how to be around you anymore." Those words hit like a lightning strike, sharp, disorienting. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to steady my breath. He sighed, rubbing his hands through his hair. "You always took care of me. You always made things better. And lately, I don't know where to put all this stuff inside my head. I feel lost. And when I look at you, I remember what it felt like to be safe. I hate that I need that so much." My heart clenched at his honesty. He wasn't confessing something wrong. He was confessing pain, vulnerability, confusion. The kind that comes when you grow up too fast, when you start questioning everything you thought you understood about love, about connection, about trust. I reached out, my hand brushing his shoulder. "You're allowed to need someone, Drew. That's not weakness. That's human." He didn't move away this time. His eyes glistened, and for a second, it felt like the world stopped between us. All the noise in my head quieted, and I saw him, not as a confused boy sitting in front of me, but as the person he was trying so hard to become. But in that silence, I realized something else. The closeness we had built was beautiful, but it was fragile. It couldn't become something it wasn't meant to be. Love, in its purest form, protects, it doesn't take. It heals, it doesn't confuse. I stood up, pacing a few steps to steady my thoughts. "Drew," I said softly, "whatever we're feeling right now, it's not what we think it is. We're both just trying to find comfort in a place that's safe, but we can't lose ourselves in it." Not like this. He nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes. I know, he murmured. I didn't mean for things to get so weird. I just didn't want to lose you. You won't, I said. You just need to find yourself again. And maybe I need to do the same. We spent the rest of that night talking, not about us, but about everything else. About his dreams of studying film, about the things he'd been too afraid to tell anyone, about how lonely it felt to grow up when the world keeps expecting you to already be strong. I listened. I laughed with him. I promised him that no matter what, he wasn't alone. And for the first time in months, Drew smiled like himself again. The following morning was quiet but peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting golden lines across the wooden floor. I made coffee and he made pancakes. Terrible ones, burnt on the edges, but it didn't matter. We ate together in silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. As I watched him joke about the smoke alarm nearly going off, I felt something settle inside me. Maybe love wasn't always about passion or desire. Maybe sometimes it was about learning when to hold on and when to let go, about protecting someone even when it meant walking a step back. Drew looked at me then, eyes soft but clear. Thanks, he said simply. For what? I asked. For being here, he replied. For not making me feel like I'm broken. I smiled. You were never broken, Drew. Just lost for a while. He nodded, and in that moment, everything that once felt confusing found its quiet resolution. What remained between us was real, honest, and grounded in care, a bond that would not be destroyed by misunderstanding but strengthened by it. Later that day, as I packed my things to leave for college again, he walked me to the car. There was no awkwardness now, no unspoken weight, just a silent understanding that we'd both grown a little, that sometimes being left alone with someone doesn't lead to chaos. It leads to clarity. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, and a strange calm washed over me. I knew Drew would be okay. And so would I. Love isn't always about what we take from each other. It's about what we give back. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting things stay pure. That night, when I lay in my dorm bed miles away, I thought of him again, not with longing, but with peace. Because finally, we both understood the kind of love that doesn't need to be crossed or confessed to be real. It just exists quietly, like light through an open window, enough to guide you home.